All right, let's begin. I first want to start off just quickly by introducing myself, and then I'll pass it on over to our host, moderator, and speaker. My name is Jude Minla Hassan. I'm the operations manager at Citizens for a Secure and Safe America, or C4SSA. And just briefly, I'm going to pause and introduce myself in Arabic and give our Arabic-speaking audience members a chance to turn on the interpretation. مرحبا، أنا اسمي جود منلا حسن، أنا بكون مديرة منظمة C4SSA. إذا لازمكم ترجمة في زر تحت الشي مكتوب عليه مترجمة، بس تضغطوا على اللغة العربية ولازم تكون عم تسمعوا شيء اللغة المترجمة. إذا عندكم أي مشكلة بهالزر بس خلوني أعرف ورح أحاول أساعدكم بهالموضوع. So I'm going to first introduce one of our hosts, Dr. Muhammad Bakr Ghbeis. He is the president of Citizens for a Secure and Safe America. And in addition to that, I would like to take a second to introduce Mr. Joel Rayburn. He's the founder and director for the American Center for Levant Studies and will be helping us serve as co-host and moderator. I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Ghbeis, to introduce our esteemed speaker.
Thank you so much, Jude. It's our pleasure to host the Congressman Wilson, the chair of the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee at the U.S. House of Representatives. We are grateful for him for his tireless efforts to bring peace and bring support to the Syrian people and other people in the region. We are thankful even more for him for his recent efforts on passing the HR 3202 introducing, I guess, and voting on that just this week. Without further ado, I'm going to have Mr. Rayburn take over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bakr. Thank you to your organization. Also, thanks to Rania Kaiser for you guys working together to set up today's event. But I want to go straight into it. Congressman Wilson, who has been a longtime supporter of seeking justice and accountability, as well as trying to secure U.S. and allied interests in Syria. We just had an extraordinary event over the last couple of days. It's been a whirlwind, Congressman, since last Thursday. When you introduced this anti-normalization bill, and then it was nonstop 24/7 just about for you and your staff over the weekend to negotiate the final form of that bill, the amended form of that bill that would be considered for the markup in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which has now been done. It passed unanimously by voice vote. So first of all, I'd like to give us your thoughts on where the bill stands now, the process that it's gone through, and where you think what is the path forward for you. But on top of that, Congressman, just congratulations for this achievement. Although it's still a work in progress, there's a long way to go for it to become law. It's just amazing what you and your staff and your other colleagues have been able to accomplish this quickly. So over to you, Congressman Wilson.
And ladies and gentlemen, and supporters of a free Syria and a prosperous Syria, one that's democratic, that has opportunities for all citizens, it's such an honor for me to be with you. And I appreciate so much the Citizens for a Secure and Safe America. Jude, you've done such great work. And indeed, Joel Rayburn, thank you for your efforts. And Doctor, thank you for yours. The Syrian American community has made such a difference. And that is that we were able to quickly develop this legislation, the Assad regime Anti-Syria Anti-Normalization Act of 2023, and in favor of the people of Syria as opposed to Assad. And I was really grateful that the bill has been, as just indicated, it's passed the House Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and it's now pending before Congress itself. And I'm really grateful that one of the lead co-sponsors is our chairman, Mike McCall of Texas. And so we have great leadership, and then it's bipartisan. I'm really grateful for the leadership of Steve Cohen, who is the past chairman of the Helsinki Commission. We've got strong bipartisan support. And then in the meantime, outside of Congress, both of President Obama, Democrat, obviously, his envoy to Syria, and the ambassador for war crimes, both individuals have now endorsed the legislation. And then I'm grateful that we have the success and appreciation of President Trump's envoy to Syria. Joel Rayburn's making such a positive difference. And it really is so inspiring. The people of Syria have inspired Republicans and Democrats to work together. And it's particularly important that we come together at this time, because sadly, Assad will be visiting the Arab League summit. And but we want people across the Middle East to understand that we have very strong legislation that expresses why there should not be normalization of relations and the consequences of renewed and mandatory sanctions and identification reports that will be presented to reveal persons or businesses or countries that get around the Caesar Act itself. And we will continue our efforts, and it's really been personal to me. I sadly visited one of the refugee camps in Jordan, and I saw such wonderful people there. We met with people who have fled their homes, and to find out that 15 million people have had to flee their homes or be relocated within the country. And then, of course, we are grateful for, and I've thanked representatives from Jordan. I've recently thanked the highest levels of government in Egypt for their efforts, and then Turkey itself. Also, different countries have really stepped forward to assist people to be secure by fleeing the country. And it should also be noted that we're in a global conflict. It's a global conflict between rule of law being opposed by rule of gun. And sadly, many people just simply didn't recognize the atrocities and the destruction of Aleppo, which was really an indication of rule of gun and the consequence of rule of gun, the loss of life. And now we see that the same tactics are being used against the people of Ukraine. And the relationship of the mass destruction of Aleppo is being repeated, as we've seen in Kherson, we've seen in Mariupol. And so it's so important that those of us who believe in rule of law stick together around the world to oppose those who are trying to impose rule of gun. And so I'm really grateful. In fact, I just 2 weeks ago tomorrow, had the opportunity to be in Kyiv, Ukraine, and visit with President Zelensky. And what a inspiration he is to the world. And following my visit to him, it was so inspiring to me to find out that he went to Rome to meet with Prime Minister Meloni of Italy. He met with Pope Francis. He has gone on to Berlin to meet with Chancellor Scholz. He is visiting country after country, showing his resolve, and then to see the resolve of NATO, to see the resolve of the European Union, countries that are standing firm for opposing rule of gun and proposing and supporting rule of law. And hey, it is encouraging to see countries like Sweden and Finland now join NATO because they've been inspired by the resistance and the strength of the people of Ukraine. And I believe that the strength and the resistance of the people of Syria will also be fully recognized. The bill that we have before us indeed extends the Caesar Act that had been previously passed in 2019. And what will now occur, has gone through the Foreign Affairs Committee, will now be before the House of Representatives in general. And we are picking up, thanks to the Syrian American community contacting their members of Congress, we're picking up a number of co-sponsors, Republicans and Democrats. And we will be working to get the bill presented on the floor. And from the presentation bipartisan on the floor, then it would go to the Senate, and then it would then be presented to the president for his signature. So that's the process that we're in. And the reason we're having success is because people have been inspired by the strength of the people of Syria to oppose the dictatorial regime of Assad, and members of Congress have been inspired by the Syrian American community making a difference and contacting their members of Congress. And so we look forward to continuing together to get the law enacted and to show again the strong support of the people of the United States and truly all people who are supportive of rule of law to work together for the people of Syria.
Congressman, that's great. Thank you for those remarks. The bill that you've gotten so much support on from the committee and now from picking up steam among your broader congressional colleagues, it does a lot. There's a lot in there that's new. There's a lot in there that strengthens the already existing measures in the Caesar Act and will make their enforcement more likely to happen, even from, say, a reluctant executive branch in some cases. But there are also some new things that are quite explicit and interesting. One of those that struck me was the very interesting sections that covered the diversion of humanitarian aid by the Assad regime, as well as the activities by Asma al-Assad's supposed charitable foundation. Can you comment on that and this effort to make sure that humanitarian aid doesn't go into the pockets of the Assad mafia?
And Joel, you're so correct. And the hearts of the people of America go out to the earthquake victims of Syria and Turkey. And with that, there's been an outpouring, obviously, of monetary support, humanitarian support to be provided to the victims of the earthquake. And sadly, the charity that you've identified, there's every indication that the funds that were received have not been going to the victims of the earthquake. And we require reporting from NGOs, from non-governmental organizations that are working on the aid, that they make reports to be fully accountable for the aid, that it actually go to the people who tragically need the assistance and deserve the assistance. And we want the best, again, for the victims of the earthquake of both Syria and Turkey.
Thank you, Congressman. A lot of people have been looking at the way that some of the Arab countries, in particular, have been reversing their policies toward Bashar al-Assad. I mean, my own observation, my own sense has been that that's been because they've lost patience with what seems like a lack of U.S. leadership. But it sure seems like the Congress never intended for the U.S. to lose leadership on the question of Syria. Is that your impression as well, as you look at not even just in the House, but across the Senate, that they're never, the idea of disengaging from Syria or disengaging from the Middle East in favor of something else just has not seemed, whether it's bandied about by people in the executive branch, seems like that idea of disengagement was never shared by people in the Congress. And this bill seems to indicate that. Is that accurate?
Hey, Joel, you're absolutely correct. The security of the American people is providing for a stable, positive, economically vibrant Middle East. Our country is so benefited from the mutual benefit of having visited the different Persian Gulf states in the last couple of months, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar. It's such an incredible inspiration to see such economic success and viability, but it's mutually beneficial. And so we know that this is very important, and the focus should always remain on how important the Middle East is for world stability. And in fact, isn't it sad, again, as I pointed out, that the horrible victimization of the people of Aleppo was really a prelude of the inhumanity of war criminal Putin that is now being conducted in Ukraine. And so it would have been so beneficial if the world had acted together to stop the inhumanity of what occurred in Aleppo, and we're learning from that. And so it's another reminder that indeed the countries that are in favor of rule of law need to be working together to also promote a free Syria.
Congressman, I know your time is short. I have another question for you, because as strong as this bill is and as broad, it covers so many bases. Actually, there are other initiatives that have been moving through the Congress recently as well that this bill seems to complement very well. And I'm thinking in particular of Congressman French Hill's Captagon bill that he introduced last year, and that I know there are thoughts about doing another iteration of that this year. How do you see this bill, this anti-normalization bill, and the Captagon bill working together?
Well, in fact, I've been working with Congressman French Hill of Arkansas in regard to the Captagon bill. We know that, sadly, that the Assad regime has really been a narco-terrorist state by providing Captagon that is so debilitating to the citizens of the Middle East. And the ruining of so many lives, and they know what they're doing. But it's meant to be a financial reward to a benefit to the Assad family. And so we're going to make every effort to see that the efforts are made for addressing Captagon as an issue. Additionally, I'm really grateful we have Congressman Michael Lawler of New York is working really hard on legislation for the special envoy for Syria. And so it's over and over again, we have initiatives in Congress, and it's bipartisan. It's an unintended consequence of the brutality and inhumanity of the Assad regime is to unite Republicans and Democrats to be supportive and to work together to support the people of Syria.
Thank you, Congressman. And maybe one last question, because I know you have to go pretty quickly. But what are the ways in which citizens, not just Syrian Americans but others, what are the ways in which they can help pitch in to show their support for this bill, as well as the other measures concerning Syria that we just mentioned?
Well, indeed, the Syrian American community is vibrant. They've assimilated into American society as leaders of business, industry, medicine, academics. So the Syrian American community is beloved, and it has significant impact in virtually every district. And I know that in South Carolina, the central part of South Carolina, the Midlands that I represent, the Syrian American community is so appreciated and makes such a difference. And so they need to be contacting their members of Congress to let them know, either by letter or phone call, that they are supportive of the anti-normalization law, and that would be just so helpful. And also, hey, they need to provide letters to newspapers, letters to the editor. Hey, radio talk shows are very important in the United States. In fact, the district I represent, the most effective way to communicate issues is by calling into radio talk shows and explaining how this has a ripple effect, being supportive again of rule of law to oppose the authoritarians who are rule of gun, and this has a great appeal again to the broad public because we understand we're in a global conflict between democracies with the rule of law being opposed by authoritarians with rule of gun. And sadly, one of the first victims have been the people of Syria, but now we see the people of Ukraine under attack by gun. And then we know that Putin has threatened Moldova and the Republic of Georgia, and he has threatened the Baltic states. He's threatened the countries of Central Asia. And so it's so important that we all stand together to promote rule of law and oppose the authoritarians who are trying to impose rule of gun.
All right, Congressman Wilson, thank you. Any closing remarks from you, sir?
Again, I'm just optimistic for the people of Syria, and as we've gotten through the issue and we've received responses from around the world. Hey, the Syrian American communities the Syrian communities everywhere, in a very positive way. And so I just want to thank them for the efforts they've made. I want to thank the different organizations that are being supportive, and I just have to restate, it's been bipartisan, and so to have the leadership of both the Democratic and Republican parties to be working together to promote a free and open Syria.
Well, thank you, Congressman. We sure do appreciate it. We're really pleased to see this initiative come from you and from the committee, and the amount of support from the broader Congress. It's very timely. It's badly needed, and I, for one, think it's going to have a great impact on the situation in Syria, but also international security, and most of all, for our purposes, U.S. interests. So thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Bakr Ghbeis. Congressman Wilson's it's Thursday, which is this is crunch day in the House. We know, Congressman. So thank you for taking time out for us. But we'll continue the conversation. I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Bakr to launch that phase of it.
Thanks so much, Joel, and many thanks to the Congressman, to the Chairman, for his leadership on this very critical and very sensitive, at least to everybody on this call, I believe, at least today, issue. And it's it's been awfully too long that the Syrians have been suffering, for the last 12 years. And it's always very cheerful to see champions like I think Chairman Wilson trying their best within their capacity to help the people of Syria. And again, thanks so much to you, Mr. Rayburn, for your generosity to share with us some of your thoughts and maybe some of the ongoing, if you would, pressing conversations and questions about this new legislation and what it could impact over the next few weeks, months, and why, if it didn't impact anything yet. So I think we have somewhat, I would say, a diverse audience. I think the majority of our audience is from Syrian Americans, but some of them are also Syrians from the diaspora at large who have showed interest to join and listen, to tune into some of those issues and conversations. So again, we are grateful for your time, and again, thanks to Rania Kaiser, the co-founder and director, chief officer, of the American Center for Levant Studies. So I'm going to invite one of my colleagues in the panel here, Mr. George Stafo, to also help me moderate some of the questions that we have from the audience. But briefly, I was going to say, which is it struck me to hear a comment on Twitter this morning from somebody who was saying, how come those people from the organization its main focus is the security of America, how come are they caring about Syria? To me it was sometimes the harsh comments can be enlightening more, and I do truly believe that the security of America will be maintained by the security of Syria. If Syria is secure, America will be secure, and vice versa. I don't think we can, at least in my own judgment, and I believe I speak on behalf of many of my colleagues in the community, that we truly believe that if Syria is safe and secure, that America will be safe and secure. It just sometimes we want to be concise and make our names as short as possible. So again, it reflects I guess philosophy for our members, and I hope that this concept becomes a norm between the West and the East, and for sure between Syria and America. So without further ado, I have a few questions, if you allow me, Joel, to ask them, and I can start with the first question, and then George Stafo is with us. He is a spokesperson of the Citizens for Security of America organization. Thank you, George, so much for joining. So the first question I have here from Dr. Maher Azzouz. The question is, what are the mechanisms in the new law or act that would assure adherence to of the UN agencies to the I guess sanctions or just adherence in general? I believe probably meaning adherence to avoid saying against sanctionable individuals or entities. Thank you.
Yeah, the bill requires the executive branch to do an assessment of the ways in which international humanitarian aid is being diverted and the degree to which is being diverted to the Assad regime or to front companies of the Assad regime. So it's going to mandate a report back to Congress delineating all of those, and that's going to give Congress the specific information that it needs, I think, to act further, to do something more. There really hasn't been something like this undertaken by the executive branch. There should have been, probably. There have been from NGOs and so on, but to do something comprehensive that makes use of all the State Department information and perhaps the intelligence community information and something like this hasn't been done before. And I think what that might, without, I don't want to prejudge what the results of that study will be, but I think it'll come back and be able to map out the way in which contractors and subcontractors wind up being fronts for regime institutions or regime figures. And I think people are going to be surprised at the scale of it as it comes back. In addition to things like, I would expect a report like that to show the way in which the regime manipulates the currency exchange rate and forces the UN to have a less favorable exchange rate for the Syrian lira than the market would dictate, and things like that. So I think it'll uncover a lot. I think that's the first step, and then I think we can see if Congress has that and they know the channels through which the diversion is happening, then they can begin to put conditions on U.S. funding for some of those international organizations. That's the way that I think it'll unfold.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Joel. How you doing? Thank you for
hi, George,
for everything you've been done so far. Next question is from Naseem Yazji. Is there any chance that the Anti-Normalization Bill to be enacted or basically passed on its own? If yes, then within which timeline, or is it most probably going to go through with the NDAA as usual in December?
Well, definitively, I defer to the House Foreign Affairs Committee folks and Congressman Wilson's staff. But just as an observer, it looks to me like a bill that comes out of the committee with almost unanimous bipartisan support, like this bill got, has an excellent chance of being passed just on its own, and not having to wait to be attached to the NDAA the way the original version of the Caesar Act wound up being passed in 2019. So yeah, I think I think it's almost certain that this bill will pass the House as a standalone bill. In the Senate, we'll have to see. The Senate is a different ballgame, but if a bill goes from the House to the Senate with something like 400 votes, it's like it's a tidal wave of momentum hitting the Senate. And that's the kind of bill that senators on both sides of the aisle are going to want to get behind. So the more support that it can gain, the more momentum this bill can gain in the coming weeks to get to a floor vote in the House, the better chance that it'll pass both the House and the Senate as a standalone bill. That's why I think it's really important for Syrian Americans and other citizens really to make their wishes known right now to their members of Congress that may not be as familiar with Syrian issues. Maybe they weren't in the Congress when the Caesar Act was passed in 2019 and in the run-up to the Caesar Act. So this is a chance for people really to reach out. If there's ever going to be a time for the Syrian American community to mobilize behind one legislative initiative, this is it.
Great, thank you so much. And we can't agree with you more, Joel. This is absolutely a priority for us, the leading and active organizations against as Congressman Wilson said, we can't be thankful enough to all the groups that have been pushing and working hard on this bill to gain as many co-sponsors as possible across the board. Organizations such as ourselves, the Syrian Institute for Progress, and others, the American Coalition for Syria, and other active and sincere organizations. And I'm sure I missed I think many, but I think everybody who's hardworking people are aware of everybody who's hardworking out there. The next question, I think some of those questions are tricky, and I think we want to make sure our our platform is somewhat open to all the different ideas. So one question here is about quote unquote, after all the war crimes and crimes against humanity Assad committed using all types of weapons, including chemical weapons, of course, was there a need really by the US for the Caesar Law or the Kept the Gun Act, and now this new act? Was there like I guess the issue is there a, and this question from Mr. Ghbeis it was in Arabic. I believe the meaning of this question was, is there even a need to waste our time and effort on these laws while we can maybe have acted earlier? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, well, I think the U.S. opted not to do a military solution in Syria a long time ago, and I think that's something that is right now it looks irreversible. That there was not going to be a rerun of Baghdad 2003 with Damascus 2011 or 2012, and in that I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's just sort of where the American people are. However, the United States still is a superpower and has all kinds of different tools at its disposal, and the Caesar Act represents the economic tool. The economic tool of a superpower, which if it's used along with its military tools in other ways, for example, in the counter-ISIS campaign and informational tools, and then the Captagon Act, I think, represents the law enforcement tool. There's an economic aspect to it, economic pressure aspect to it, but I think the Caesar Act plus this Anti-Normalization Bill and then the Captagon Act, this is the U.S. as using its economic superpower and its law enforcement capability together against the Assad regime. It's pretty strong when you put these in as elements of a broader strategy. Now that's something that the U.S. has lacked for the last couple of years, but it's there. The Caesar Act has within it the framework for a broader strategy, which is political pressure, economic pressure, law enforcement pressure, military pressure, informational pressure, all together to isolate the Assad regime and compel it to come to a political solution to the conflict.
All right. Next question is from Mr. Muhammad Mustafa. What is the impact on Arab countries that are leading normalization efforts with the Syrian regime in terms of sanctions, considering that they are allies of the United States, for example, Saudi Arabia or UAE and others?
Yeah, this bill,
impact of the bill. Yes, sorry.
Right. Yeah, this bill, along with the underlying Caesar Act, is going to make it really difficult and really risky for anyone to try to normalize economic relations with the Assad regime. It's one thing for countries to reopen their consulates and so on and have consular services and diplomatic relations. That's not really something that the U.S. can stop because that's a sovereign decision by those countries. But what the U.S. can do and what the EU can do is prohibit those countries or individuals in those countries from reestablishing normal commercial ties, economic ties with the Assad regime using the dollar or using the euro or using the British pound. And that's what this act is going to do. What it means is that the diplomatic normalization of relations between Arab countries and the Assad regime is really, I don't see any way that it's going to be followed up by a significant normalization of economic relations. there's not going to be legitimate money. There's not going to be above the table money that's going to follow this restoration of diplomatic relations, as long as these bills stand. And this is essentially the intervention that Congress is making. Those are the implications for, the Gulf, some of the Gulf countries, and so on.
Thank you so much. I think many questions from the audience is really about the practical implications of these laws. I think many of if not all of those laws, the impact of them takes months and years. So I believe it's always hard to not attach the impact if it's taken that long. So and I'm sure many of the questions are really about that. For example, this question is from Dr. Qutaiba Saeed Isa. Do you expect Idlib to remain with the opposition, or is it possible for it to go to the regime, especially if Erdogan does not win the elections? Is it true that Idlib is an American-controlled area at this point?
No, I mean, Idlib is not under American control. The United States does not have a presence in Idlib. Idlib is essentially, it's under opposition protection, and it's under Turkish protection. I don't see that changing. Assad is not strong enough to militarily challenge Turkey and the Free Syrian Army and the other armed groups there. And I don't see, regardless of who is in the presidential seat or who has a majority in the Turkish parliament, it's just not in Turkey's interests to let the Assad regime come back and seize control of these territories, because we all know what that would result in. It would result, first of all, there'd be a war. There would be a restarting on the large scale of the war, but also that would just create another flood of refugees into Turkey, which is exactly what all the parties in Turkey don't want to see. But that's exactly what would happen.
Next question is by Jamal Muhammad Lahib. It's a two-part question. Can the law be considered a strong tool to force the Assad regime to accept the Arab Initiative and achieve its goals of implementing the Geneva Resolution 2254? And is this law considered as an American response to Turkey's move towards normalization with Assad? Thank you.
The first one, in my opinion, so economic sanctions by themselves, are not, they can't do the work all by themselves. They have to be part of a broader policy. They have to be part of an international consensus. And for example, the United States and the European countries, if they stay strong and they have political isolation combined with economic isolation, that takes the dollar and the euro both off the table for any commercial relations between Damascus and anyone else. And that would be pretty darn strong. Again, that wouldn't happen just by itself. There have to be other measures, which is why I think the Cap the Gun Act is a pretty strong initiative. And there also has to be leadership, especially from the United States. I don't think we've seen that for the last couple of years, but I think what you're seeing is Congress is kind of taking the steering wheel of leadership, and in a bipartisan way. So yeah, I think if these initiatives that are out there can have quite a strong impact on constraining the Assad regime and compelling it to go back into the political process. As far as the law being an American response to Turkey, no, I think it's much more that this is a response to the countries in the Arab League, bringing Assad back into the Arab League and reestablishing relations between Damascus and the Gulf.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna just give Mr. Rayburn a break, maybe like for a couple of minutes here, and I think I'm gonna ask Dr. Haytham Al-Bizm to join us on the panelist here to give a couple of minutes of remarks or comments. Let me just invite you here. I don't see Haytham anymore. Maybe the technical error, but okay. He's
He's on. He's
Sorry.
there, but he's gonna unmute himself and speak. Nice. We see him. Yes. Hey.
Dr. Haytham, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I just can't. I don't see you there. But okay, go ahead, please.
I think the control of the camera is here. Let me see. Okay.
There you go.
I think you can. Hello, everybody. First, I want to thank Bakr for inviting me to this event, which is very, very important, and also thank Joel for his, endless effort and compassion to the Syrian people, and for his help to all organizations. And I really, on a personal level, appreciate that, Joel. I wanted to, thank first C4 for their, endless effort in pushing this agenda into the Congress. I really appreciated Bakr, George, Alia, and everyone else in your organization. So, Joel, I wanted to ask you something. As you know, today there is a meeting happening in Saudi Arabia, where all the Arab presidents and kings are meeting in order to normalize the relationship with Assad. And this act currently being proposed is going to take some time to pass. So it has no teeth now. So what's your advice between now and until we pass this Anti-Normalization Act we should do? On different level, meaning a level in the Congress, Senate, and a level of contacting the Saudi Arabia and all other nations, saying all American Syrian organization, are not happy with the pushing these because you are, shaking hands of murderer, and this is, hypocrisy when you say something in the past and you do something else, while it's something wrong. So how can we keep a pressure on them? I learned from the congressman that radio talks, but this is inside the United States. It's not something will influence them. But what can we do to influence these decisions and put heat and pressure on them?
Okay, those are good questions. I would say, first of all, I don't think the bill, just by being introduced and by getting the momentum that it's gotten, it will have a political impact on this whole normalization trend, because it's like a warning shot to the Arab countries about this is what's coming. And they know enough about Washington to know that to be able to watch and see that this bill got broad bipartisan support. Once it passes the House, if it passes the House quickly and with a really wide margin of support, they are going to sit up and take notice, and they're going to have to start recalculating about these normalization policies and the limits of normalization policies. In terms of economic normalization and just sort of doing investment and things like that, these countries are not going to do something just in the interim. It's significant in the interim period between now and whenever the bill passes. That's, they move. It's like turning an aircraft carrier around. So large scale investment from the Gulf is just not going to go into Syria while this bill is hanging potentially over their heads. So I think that's one thing. It will, just by this bill being introduced and passing committee so quickly, it will start to have an impact and slow down the normalization train before economic relations get reestablished. I think there are other major things underway that I think together with the economic sanctions and the other measures that are in this bill, will have a serious impact. First one is the accountability, the war crimes trials, the crimes against humanity investigations and trials that are going on in Europe in particular. This is major, and I think civil society organizations should look at the ways that they can help to resource those investigations, the gathering of dossiers, and so on, in order to help build the momentum for accountability that's already going in Europe. This is another major factor that can have a political impact. The next thing I think also, so I think if you have that act, or if you have the bill that Congressman Wilson introduced, if you have the justice and accountability effort, if it can really be scaled up and really resourced, that will have a major impact. And then I think it's the Captagon. Certainly French Hill has taken an important step, but also I think civil society organizations and Syrian communities in Europe and in the Gulf should be mobilizing, maybe to try to kind of crowdsource the exposure of the Captagon networks. You know, I know Syrians know all about each other's business in some way or fashion. That's just, Syrians are so networked and so interlinked. I know there are people out there, there are communities out there that know where the Captagon trafficking is happening, who's behind it. And it's not so much the Captagon production and preparation that's happening inside Syria, but it's where that Captagon crosses over outside Syria and goes into other jurisdictions or in international law enforcement jurisdictions. That crossover point, those crossover points, those are the important ones, not just for the drug, but when the money comes, when the drug goes into a market like Saudi Arabia, when the money comes out, where does that money go? And I know there are Syrians out there that have the data points here, and that no one will know every bit of it. But if there can be kind of a mapping of that money, where is it coming out? When it comes out of the Gulf, where is it going? Where does it cross over from being illicit money to going into licit money, into bank accounts, into real estate, into businesses? To crowdsource this kind of information and to support NGOs that are doing investigations like this, I think that could be really important. So that's the way in which I think that Syrians could make a difference, even while we're waiting for the passage of this bill.
Thank you so much, Joel, and thanks, Dr. Haytham, for your contribution. Any more questions for Joel from you, Haytham, before we move to the next?
Should we send a letter on the behalf of every American Syria that we're gonna pursue every legal channel to stop this normalization, which is against the Syrian people? Should we do this? It has any impact if we send this letter to all the Arab leaders, or has just no impact, you think?
Well, I think the Arab leaders are making their calculations already. I don't know that I don't know that they're going to be swayed by letters at this point. They should know, though, they should know that their friends in different countries, that they're in disagreement with the policy choices that they are making. So I think that's useful. What I think, though, the letters now, I would chime in. I would reinforce what Congressman Wilson said, which is letters to the editor from Syrians in local newspapers, getting involved in local media, local talk shows, and so on, to explain what this issue is. You know, the vast majority of Americans really are not aware of all the aspects of the Syria situation. And they certainly don't understand the way in which the Syrian regime and the situation in Syria hurts U.S. interests. You know, I think Bakr's the C4SSA is a very apt name, because a safe and secure America requires change in Syria. It requires getting the Assad regime to stop its destabilizing behavior. In so many ways, not just against the Syrian people, which is horrible, but against the region all around it. That this is a regime where the things that this regime does don't just stay in Syria. It is a constant engine of toxic instability that goes out to the surrounding region and into the international community. And Americans, I don't think, understand the degree to which that's the case from the Assad regime. So I think Syrian communities, Syrian American organizations can help to educate their fellow Americans about this. It was one of the things I saw when I was a Syria envoy. It's just, people who are not close students of Middle Eastern affairs or international affairs, they just don't understand what the dynamics are in Syria. Or there are many people who, to the extent they have heard something about Syria, they've heard the wrong thing, which is that Assad is protecting minorities, or Assad it's a choice between Assad and Al-Qaeda. It's the choice between Assad and the terrorists, and so on. And it's just, we all know that it's not true.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haytham. I have two more questions, and then we'll conclude our conference this afternoon. I have a question here from from the audience, from Dr. I believe Ra'i al-Halabi. When will we see the American-Russian communication? Historically, there's always been sort of Lavrov, Kerry, agreements, talks, etc. We haven't seen for a while, so I think the question is about that. When will we see a new or American-Russian communication about Syria, noting that all American administrations are pushing the Syrians to agree with Russians?
I don't think you're going to see it right now. As far as I know, that diplomatic channel on Syria between the U.S. administration and Russia is not active right now. It was suspended at the time of the invasion of Ukraine, and really, I think pretty much all the working diplomacy between the U.S. and Russia was disrupted by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I don't think that's on the radar screen right now, which means that this is a time for the U.S. to strengthen its pressure tools against the Assad regime, but also I think to consider the Caesar Act plus this Anti-Normalization Bill. It has measures that are against Russia in it. Because of Russia's behavior and its past behavior, its continuing presence, and its continuing behavior inside Syria. Practically all of the generals that have been committing war crimes against Ukraine committed war crimes in Syria first. The Wagner Group, all Syrians know what the Wagner Group did in Syria, and we see them doing exactly the same thing in Ukraine now. So I've always considered the Caesar Act and now this Anti-Normalization Bill should be considered a tool that can be used to raise the cost to Vladimir Putin for his Middle East policy through his #1 Arab client, which is Bashar al-Assad.
Okay, I guess final question, and this is more of your opinion and advice on what to do in this case. This is from Mahmoud Diab. With the presidential elections coming closer and the expected debate discussion rounds with each of the candidates, what possible ways can we implement to help bring back Syria to the front of the foreign policy, and maybe have each of the candidates make a policy promise to support the Syrian cause for freedom and liberty?
That's a really good question, because I witnessed that neither in 2016 nor in 2020 was Syria a campaign issue on either side. In fact, I was in the Trump administration, and we came into office without a Syria policy. So I hope to be able to see that won't happen again this time. Certainly on the Republican side, but I think it's also incumbent on both sides. This, first of all, Syria should not be about a partisan issue, and I don't think it is. I think what we're seeing in Congress right now is that Syria is still a bipartisan issue. The policy of that lay behind the Caesar Act has broad bipartisan support. So I think to the extent that people are interacting with the presidential campaigns, they should make that point, that there's a broad bipartisan consensus for a pressure policy against the Assad regime to try to get the conditions that were laid out in the Caesar Act, which is stop waging war on the people of Syria, stop cooperating with Russia and Iran to commit war crimes, let the detainees out of prison, and hold war criminals accountable. You know, I mean, that's the basis of that's the basis of the Caesar Act. I really think so if I were Syrian American organizations, or if I were PACs or other, donors to presidential campaigns, I would want to hear those campaigns commit to the enforcement of the Caesar Act and the enforcement of this Anti-Normalization Act. I think that's something that Syrian Americans have every right to expect.
Great. Well, thanks again so much, Joel. We can't agree more, of course, just for reference. But again, thank you so much for your time, generosity to spend with our community today. And of course, thanks to the Congressman Wilson for his time and compassion. I have a last comment here from a Syrian inside Syria who sent us this comment, and they wanted us to read this and stay anonymous. Syrians were feeling very demoralized watching Assad being hosted in Saudi Arabia a few minutes before this important seminar. But watching Congressman Wilson with the green flag picture on his wall, his inspiring words, and most importantly, his promise that neither he or the American people have forgotten the Syrian people, was a healing to many broken hearts. Syrian people thank everyone who made this meeting possible. Thank you so much for your nice words and heartful words. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and week, and we promise we'll be in touch in the future again for similar webinars. Thanks, everyone. And I'm sorry, the small last thing, we are deeply apologizing about the technical issue of the translation, so we will make sure the video has Arabic subtitles when we have it out after it's finalized. Thanks so much.
Ma salama.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.